Richard Anderson laughed at me across a boardroom table, and in that moment I made a decision. Not an emotional one. Not the kind where your face burns and your hands shake. The quiet kind. The kind that comes after 12 years of building something so precise, so completely invisible to the people who were supposed to respect you, that by the time they finally see it, all they can do is watch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm out. I sat there, let him finish laughing, nodded once and slid my phone under the table. The text I sent took 11 seconds to type. Anderson Holdings was a $50 million company. Their emergency board meeting started 9 minutes and 40 seconds later. My name is Alexander Reeves. I'm 37 years old, managing partner and chief investment officer at Reeves Capital Group in Atlanta. We manage a private equity portfolio sitting just north of $340 million. I tell you this not to impress you, but because in a few minutes you're going to need to understand that Richard Anderson had every opportunity to know who I was. He just never bothered to find out. I met Sophia at an art fundraiser in Midtown Atlanta 6 years ago. She was standing near a painting in a green dress, holding a glass of wine she kept forgetting to drink. When she finally caught me staring, she didn't look away first. I liked that immediately. We dated 8 months before I met her family. That gap alone should have told me something. Richard Anderson had grown his father's regional construction firm into a significant commercial real estate operation across the Southeast. He was a big man in small rooms. Everywhere he went, he made sure the room knew he'd arrived. His wife Claudette had learned to smile at everything he said, even when he was wrong, which was often. Their son Brett was 29, worked in business development, drove a company car, attended meetings he didn't prepare for, and told people at cocktail parties that he was in real estate. The first dinner at their Lake Murray home, Richard shook my hand, looked me over the way a man does when he's already decided something, and said, "Sophia tells me you work in investments." He said it like I worked at a mall kiosk. I told him I ran a private equity firm. He nodded slowly, the nod of someone who's heard words they don't fully understand but won't admit it. "Boutique operation?" he asked. "We manage about $280 million, I said. "Growing." He smiled with the particular condescension of a man who has decided your numbers aren't real yet. "That's good for you," he said. "Takes time to build something real." I looked at the boathouse behind him and said, "Yes, sir, it does." And I left it at that. Sophia and I got married 14 months later. I paid for most of the wedding because Richard kept offering to contribute and then finding reasons the timing wasn't ideal. Sophia said it didn't matter. I said it didn't matter. But I noticed Richard called me directly for the first time 2 years into our marriage, not to check in, not to build a relationship. Anderson Holdings was facing a liquidity crisis on a major Savannah development. Their lender had gotten cautious over a regulatory issue their attorneys hadn't properly vetted. $4 million in pre-development costs were about to evaporate. He needed bridge capital fast, and he asked me, his son-in-law who ran a private equity firm, whether I knew anyone who might be interested. Not whether I could help. Whether I knew anyone. Like I was a referral service. Like he needed to keep his distance from asking family directly. I told him I'd make some calls. Instead, my team ran a full analysis of the Savannah project within 48 hours. By the end of that week, I came back with a formal proposal. Reeves Capital would provide the bridge financing. We'd take a preferred equity stake, structured to protect our position, with conditions around the regulatory resolution timeline. It was a fair deal. Frankly, a generous one. Most bridge lenders would have demanded harsher terms. Richard reviewed it for 11 days. Then he told me he'd found another lender, through a business associate. He was vague about the terms the way people are, when the terms are worse than what they were offered. "We appreciate you looking at it, Alexander," he said. "But family is family and business is business. You understand?" That phrase settled into me and stayed there. His philosophy made clean. His family, his business, me somewhere in between, adjacent. Useful, maybe. But not really inside the circle. Over the next 3 years, that philosophy expressed itself in dozens of small ways that meant nothing individually and everything together. At dinners, conversation was always Anderson Holdings. When Sophia would ask about my work and I'd start to explain something, Richard would nod the nod of a man waiting for his turn to speak. At Thanksgiving, I mentioned we'd just closed a significant acquisition, a manufacturing technology company in Chattanooga we'd spent 7 months structuring. Richard looked up from his plate and said, "Good, you need to keep building that track record," as if he were my mentor. As if I were a junior analyst who'd just closed his first deal. I was 35 years old with a portfolio that would have made most people in his industry go quiet. Sophia touched my hand under the table. I smiled and ate my food. The invitation to the Anderson Holdings board meeting came through Sophia, which was the first warning sign I missed. Richard had been approached about a massive mixed-use development in downtown Nashville. $400 million. Residential towers, commercial space, retail, a hotel component. The kind of project that would triple Anderson Holdings overnight. But to participate at the level he wanted, he needed a serious equity partner. Someone with institutional relationships, access to LP capital, and the credibility to make pension funds and family offices take a meeting. He needed exactly what I did for a living. Sophia mentioned it over dinner like it was a gift, like her father was finally opening the door. I asked how it came up. She said he'd called her. Not me, her, she was still the intermediary. I told her I was interested in hearing more. The meeting was at Anderson Holdings headquarters in Columbia, South Carolina. Richard sat at the head of the table. Brett sat to his right holding a pen he never used. Their CFO Patricia sat with a folder of documents, and a man named Garrett Walsh, introduced as their financial advisor, completed the group. Sophia sat beside me. Richard presented the Nashville project well. He had the practiced confidence of someone who'd sold himself in rooms his whole career. When he finished, I started asking questions about the capital structure, the waterfall, how senior debt was being sourced, whether they had pre-commitments from institutional lenders. Garrett answered some of them loosely. Patricia answered others with more precision. Brett wrote something in his notepad that I was certain had nothing to do with the meeting. Then Richard asked me to walk them through what Reeves Capital's involvement would look like. I spent 15 minutes explaining exactly how we would structure our participation, the size of capital I could source within 90 days, the LP relationships we had specifically interested in Southeast and Mid-South development, and how we could anchor the institutional piece of the capital stack in a way that would unlock lower-cost senior debt. I was thorough and specific. I had run the numbers before walking in the door. When I finished, Richard leaned back and smiled. The same smile I had seen at every family dinner for 4 years. The one that said he'd already decided something before I arrived. "Alexander," he said, "what you're describing sounds like a meaningful contribution." He paused. "But we're looking for a partner at the 50 million commitment level. Institutional scale. Someone with the balance sheet to anchor the equity raise." He tilted his head. "That's a different conversation than what Reeves Capital typically handles, isn't it?" I stayed calm. "I manage 340 million in assets under management right now. My LP network includes institutional relationships capable of providing the full commitment you're describing and more. I've structured deals this size and larger." Richard nodded. "Not processing, just waiting." And then he did the thing I will carry with me for the rest of my professional life. He laughed. Easy and dismissive. The laugh of a man who finds what you've said charming but not quite serious. "Alexander, we appreciate you being here. Sophia tells me you've built something over there, but we don't need pocket change on a deal like this. Come back to us when you've got real institutional weight behind you." Then he looked at Garrett. "Let's talk about the Whitmore Group timeline after lunch." And that was it. I was excused. The meeting continued around me. Sophia's hand found my knee under the table. But I'd already moved somewhere very quiet, very still. I looked at Richard Anderson and made my decision. I slid my phone beneath the edge of the table and sent a single text to my investment manager, Daniel Fitch. Withdraw all backing from Anderson Holdings. Freeze the preliminary commitment letter for Nashville. Do not process anything further until I call. Move immediately. What Richard didn't know, because he had never once asked, was that Reeves Capital had been quietly positioning as the lead equity arranger on the Nashville project for 22 days before that board meeting. Daniel had sent our preliminary term sheet to Patricia's office 2 weeks prior. We were in active conversations with the developer, Summit Meridian out of Brentwood, Tennessee. We had LP commitments and early discussions. We were, in the language of the industry, soft-circled. Without our participation, the capital stack did not exist. The Nashville deal did not happen. Richard had invited me to the meeting without ever asking anyone to explain what my involvement actually meant. I left at 2 in the afternoon. Sophia followed me into the hallway. Her face was a conflict I recognized. "He didn't mean it the way it sounded," she said. I looked at her. "Sophia, how long has your father known what I do for a living?" She looked away. 4 years, I said quietly. He's had 4 years to ask one question about my work. He never did. She had no answer. Just the expression she wore when she understood something she didn't want to understand. I kissed her forehead, told her I needed to make some calls, and took the elevator to the lobby. Standing on Main Street with the February light flat across the Congaree River, I called Daniel. "It's done," he said before I spoke. "Commitment letter retracted. Summit Meridian notified. Carolina's institutional partners flagged." The Nashville deal's capital structure began unraveling within the hour. The emergency board meeting at Anderson Holdings started at 1:56. Summit Meridian called Richard directly at 2:43. Carter Webb, the lead developer, told him plainly that without Reeves Capital's equity arrangement, the entire capital structure was in question. 14 months of work, $4 million in costs, and a growth strategy Richard had already presented to his own board of advisors. All of it dependent on a capital structure I had been quietly building, while Richard treated me like someone who had wandered into the wrong meeting. Richard called me 3 times that afternoon. He let the first 2 go while finishing a call with Carolina's institutional partners. On the 3rd call, I was driving north towards Charlotte for a dinner meeting. I answered. His voice was different. The smooth boardroom confidence had something underneath it that wasn't quite managing itself. He said there had been some confusion with the capital arrangement. I told him there was no confusion on my end. He asked why I had withdrawn. I told him he'd said this was a $50 million business and that he didn't need my pocket change. So I removed my pocket change. A very long silence. Then, "We need to talk." I told him I was available Thursday and had Daniel send a calendar invite.